Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Yes, we still indeed do this show. I know it's been 2 weeks, but everybody, we are back. Cade Kennedy here with you, along with Connor and Andrew, Connor Gray, Andrew Santangelo. Before we get into everything, of course, as always, if you enjoy this episode, feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment down below. And now, on to the most important question of the day. Andrew, Connor, how are y'all doing today?
Doing pretty good. Another month gone by. I mean, we flipped the calendar here tomorrow morning, which is crazy to think about. But no, it's been good. Good start to the good semester so far, and ready to dive into some more as we get set to turn the page on another sports season.
Yeah, well, with football gone, baseball coming around, and NBA getting into the meat of things halfway through the season. It's just gonna be exciting rest of the time for sports.
It truly is an exciting time. Of course, football technically not done yet. If you're a believer in the XFL and USFL, I know some people are, some people aren't. That's been entertaining to say the least. Just everything going around. I mean, week 1 you had Lemongate and the beer snake controversy there, but other than that, the XFL's having a good time. But we're not here to talk about the XFL today. We're here to get started with, well, something we talked about a lot during the summer, made its way a bit into the fall, and now it's returned. Sports Illustrated has, I don't know what they've done to their website, but essentially the gist you need to know from looking at it here, the Big Ten trying to possibly expand again. I'm not going to say they are going to expand or aren't here, but a recent article from Sports Illustrated mentioning that the Big Ten has 4 members they're trying to target, according to College Football Insider Matt Hayes. Those would be Washington, Oregon, Cal, and Stanford. So not a surprise there. Cal and Stanford trying to raise the academic prestige. And Washington and Oregon, you have the Seattle and Portland markets trying to get after big-name teams there.
I thought Stanford's academic standards were like really, really high.
They are.
Just like it's the way you word it, you sound like the Big Ten's academic standards are way higher than theirs.
The Big Ten try to get up there because you've got Michigan and a lot of those schools have their whole thing is getting AAU, so having someone like Cal and Stanford would really help boost their academics.
Yeah, just the way you worded it made it sound like, oh, do they not have high standards as I thought they did? But anyways, obviously Oregon and Washington were according to like sports-wise, those were the teams, universities to go after, but obviously to help with the academic prestige that the Big Ten loves to flaunt, obviously Cal and Stanford is also the way to go. But I don't really know what to make of this, besides that it need to be a move for the Big Ten. Who knows what that means for the Pac-12 as it is now. Will it mean the destruction of that conference, or do they somehow find a way to keep the ship afloat?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Big Ten already stole a couple teams, so they're going to continue to do. I mean, they know the conference is in trouble, so they're going to continue to do what they can do to try to steal some of those other big market teams, big money schools as well, that they can kind of get there and make travel easier. Then you can split the divisions up better, and then lower travel issues for, say, USC and UCLA right now. If you were to add, say, a Stanford, you can help their travel cases there and set up a division farther out there. So I think that's the best bet for the Big Ten, is to continue to try to take from the Pac-12 right now, because they know that conference could be in jeopardy.
Yeah, to me, it's one of those that if the Big Ten does get their way, especially if they got all 4, if they were able to get Stanford, Cal, Washington, Oregon, I think that is more than likely the end of the Pac-12 at that point, because I would only assume that Arizona State, Utah, Colorado would try to find a way to bolt as well, and that would just leave Washington State and Oregon State to either move to the Mountain West and just let that whole conference dissolve. I know there have been rumors of adding San Diego State and SMU to the Pac-12, which really doesn't add anything in my opinion. You're just trying to grab teams and keep things afloat there, but if you're the Pac-12, you're just holding on for dear life, trying to make sure that everything goes well. You still don't have a media deal for 2024 yet. So the Pac-12 is not in the best places right now.
No, it really is not. And thing is that you do, like San Diego State, you get San Diego, and you said SMU, right?
SMU.
That gives you the Dallas-Fort Worth market, but as a regards to team as a university, it doesn't really your prestige doesn't look as good, but that's still at least in a market that still drives a lot of revenue. But I don't think it will add much to their conference, and I don't think it will really do a whole lot of else. And so you more likely would see some of those Pac-12 teams default to probably the Big 12 as it seems like the Big 12 is in a much better overall spot versus where the Pac-12 is, because Big 12 already went through their whole crisis and were able to rebound from it, and seem like they're going to be they're just going to roll with it with what's going on. Obviously, with Texas and OU leaving after next season, we'll see how that goes. But I definitely could see, obviously, there's been huge talks of trying to get the Arizona schools to come to the Big 12, because at least you get the Phoenix market, and they might consider there was obviously Colorado was in the conversation, but I don't know if they'll go for it, because at least there's been at least there are reports that Colorado laughed it off about going back to the Big 12, but I don't know.
Well, a couple things off that. I think the Big Ten's going for the big markets. That's what they want. And I think you could argue SMU brings in a bigger market than Rutgers and Iowa and probably some other schools already in the Big Ten. So I think SMU does provide cases there, and that market will add a lot of value. And then I think also as far as the Pac-12 goes, they've got to be careful with saying they've already rebounded. I mean, they have a plan in place, but those teams haven't left the Pac-12 yet, so they haven't even felt a year. They haven't even been without those yet, so I don't think they've rebounded yet. I think they're trying to get ahead of the game and prepare what's to come, because they don't know what's to come. They don't know how bad revenue might drop off from viewership or from people following it. So the Pac-12 is trying to plan ahead and figure out a good plan that keeps them afloat.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting scenario, definitely, to keep an eye on there. And then the Baylor athletic director, Mack Rhoades, saying that the Big 12 must be ready for movement from the Pac-12 schools in case the Pac-12 media negotiations collapse. I've seen things on that where Amazon's gotten involved, but they really only want a window to a Friday night game. ESPN really only wants that in what we would consider the 9:30, 10 here, be the 7 o'clock, your Pac-12 after dark slot, essentially. And it's one of those where the Pac-12 really just is not in the best of situations right now when it comes to that TV deal they're trying to hammer out.
No, and that's because they don't get the crowd that other people get. They don't have the names, especially when you lose schools like UCLA and USC, and they're going to be going on earlier. Like, people are going to keep going to those bigger conferences there in the Big 12, the SEC, etc. And I think, the Pac-12 is in jeopardy. Because they are losing the markets there all over the place. And I think what they need to find a way to do is figure out a way to up their Pac-12 network. I think that's where other places and conferences have a step up on the Pac-12. As you look at, everybody knows what the Big Ten network is. Everybody knows. The Big 12 had the big deal with ESPN Plus and all that. You can get those. The Pac-12 doesn't have that advantage right now. And I think that's a spot they need to figure it out as well. Even the Big East, they have all their games on Fox's online network, Fox Sports Go or whatever it's called. So I think, again, Pac-12 needs to kind of get with today's times, I guess, and kind of update their stuff to be more friendly for people to find them.
I'll say one school I'm surprised that I know it mainly comes down to markets, but I'm surprised no one's tried to look at Utah as a school to go after.
Yeah, Utah's one of those. Salt Lake City's a decent-sized market, but it's one of those that they're kind of considered in that same area where you don't really mess with them. I would think if Utah does leave, it would probably be towards the Big 12 is where I would think the Pac-12 does collapse.
One thing I was just looking up is that they also have AAU status. Yeah. So they have the academic prestige if they were trying to make a claim to the Big Ten, which they would like to probably go to.
I'm sure.
But obviously you run into that issue is how many teams is too much for that, and would going to the Big 12 be a better bet for them? But obviously, there are issues with BYU might play in it. play a factor in where they might go, or if they're willing to bite the bullet and just be like, we'll just deal with BYU, even though would rather probably not have to deal with them as much.
Well, I think Utah is just in a tough spot because there's a lot better programs out there. Like you mentioned it, Connor. I mean, you can only add so many teams. The Big 12's already figured out who they're replacing OU and Texas with and more. And then, like you said, you'd rather go after the Arizona schools. So, I mean, Utah is just the odd man out.
Yeah,
that's if you want to go up to 16 teams, which is, it seems like the Big 10 wants to do. But I don't know if the Big 12 will want to do it.
Well, Big 10's already at 16.
Yeah, that's right. Never mind. They'll be going beyond. They'll be going to 20, won't they?
If they were to add all of these schools, yeah, that would put them up by 20. And, I mean, then you just play, when is enough? Would you go 20? Would you go 24? Would you just try to go all the way to 28 or 32? I mean, it's one of those you never really know when the end of this is going to be.
Personally, I'd say 10 to 12 is the perfect number. 16 is about the max. But in this case, yeah, you're going to 20, so I'd say 20 is the max, I would say.
Yeah.
Because then you can at least split it 10 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the most Big 12 would probably be right for would be at max would be either 14 or to 16 if you're pushing it. If you were to expand and grab more teams, but I think where they're sitting right now, they're not. I don't think Big 12 is in any hurry to figure out who they want to get because they still at least got a couple years before teams start trying to ask about wanting in.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting situation to keep an eye on. It's just, once again, it is that time of the season. Conference realignment picking back up, but moving away from conference realignment for a bit, over to college basketball. The AP Top 25 came out yesterday, and Houston, Alabama, Kansas, UCLA, Purdue rounding out that top 5. It's hard to think. We talked about it. Tomorrow's March Madness is officially on its way. It's hard to think. It's almost conference championship week, and we are getting intensely down the stretch here. Marquette at 6, the highest Marquette has been in a long time, since before 1978, I believe. Baylor at 7, Arizona 8, Texas 9, Gonzaga up to 10, K-State, Tennessee, Virginia, UConn, and Indiana rounding out that top 15. And then Miami, St. Mary's, San Diego State, Xavier, Providence, Maryland, TCU, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and how about Pittsburgh? It's been a while since the Panthers have been on there, and I believe the first time since they changed their logo. So it's been a while for Pittsburgh, but hey, it's good to see them back. And then getting into the receiving votes, just being from Oklahoma, it's always interesting. Oral Roberts, 40 receiving votes. You don't see that often.
They've been playing pretty good after their big March Madness fun upset. They've kept it going, and we'll see what they're able to do this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, to say the least, as Max Asmus continues to lead the Eagles to bigger and brighter things. I know they had the undefeated record in the Summit League this year, but, I mean, you want to talk about just a season we've had where it's weird in a way that we've usually had, at least it feels like, one or two teams that kind of separate themselves from, okay, these are probably your favorites here. To me, it feels like we really haven't had that this year. I mean, just when it looked like Purdue was about to pull away from everyone, they have a few losses. Okay, now it's Houston's turn, then they lose a game. Then Kansas and Alabama have a turn, they lose a game. Everyone's kind of gone through the revolving door, so to speak, of who's the favorite to win the national title.
Yeah, there is no favorite this year. I mean, it is just wide open. You look at it, you mentioned Purdue. Not only, every time they seem like they've hit that stride, they struggle. They've been a team in the March Madness that doesn't bode well a lot, and they get upset a handful of times. I know they had that one big run here a few years ago, but outside of that, you don't see them go too far. I mean, Gonzaga is the same way, a team that they always find a way to make a run but never can win the big game. Obviously, Kansas is looking to repeat, but I like Baylor better than Kansas, I'm being honest, just in the Big 12. Alabama's obviously has the off-the-court issues. Houston, I mean, how well-tested are they is where I kind of worry a little bit. And their style of game just always finds a way to hit a stale point in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 usually, as they're very defensive-minded and the offensive struggles catches up with them. They kind of remind me of that Virginia team, but obviously Virginia eventually got one, so maybe this is the year for Houston and a year that's kind of down everywhere else.
Yeah, it'll be intriguing to see, and I mean, it was something I know, Andrew, we've talked about a bit before with Gonzaga. I remember it was along the lines of how quickly will they start to rise once that conference play begins, and Well, St. Mary's was able to put in their work a few weeks ago. The Gales, they're always a team that, to me, they're kind of a reminiscent of, some of those Houston, Virginia. They like to play it slow. They like to try to rely on their defense and slow things down. St. Mary's is one of those that, even though I think most people know about them at this point, I mean, if you don't and you're a college basketball fan, you know kind of who they are. If you don't, well, you're going to find out. That's always how St. Mary's is. But it'll be fun to see how they go and throughout the season. And, I mean, we've had so many just fun scenarios. The Big 12 continue to be the best conference in college basketball. You've got the Big East kind of having their ups and downs. UConn's trying to get back on the up and up after their roller coaster of a season, to say the least. And just so many fun storylines about to all come together as we get into March. But looking at the bracketology real quick, getting into what Mr. Lunardi has as his first teams, 1 seeds, top overall seed being Alabama, which is a bit interesting. It's always fun to see that debate because the AP polling usually is not going to line up with what Lunardi says. Then you've got other bracketologists and everyone's in there. But I just want to say, because this is the only time I'll get to talk about OU in March, how did we beat Alabama? I will never know, but hey, it was a good time. You can watch the video of the court storming on the Guys Who Stare at Stats channel if you really want to watch that. And then North Carolina, the first team out, that might slowly start to change. The Tar Heels are trying to get it back in the picture. Then Arizona State being the last team in. When you're able to beat Arizona, especially the way they did, Sun Devils trying to play their way in.
Yeah, I think here Alabama, it surprises me, but I think that goes with the Houston not being well tested. I think that's where, not that, being the second overall seed in the March Madness is that much of a downgrade, but I think that's kind of where Alabama might have the slight edge. They play in the SEC, so they not only had a tough out-of-conference schedule, but they're tested in conference for the duration, where I think the longest time you had Temple, the second team in the AAC. I think it's now Memphis. So I think that's a little bit where Houston has a disadvantage in terms of that. But where they do have an advantage is Alabama, them being in the SEC. They can, they'll have 2 tough games this week, and then they'll get a tough road to the SEC championship. Where Houston, I don't think any of us will be shocked if they go on and win the AAC championship, and that's where they earn that 1 spot. So, Houston, it'll play out the way it should here in the end. But I'm interested to see how the bubble shakes out, because you can throw a lot of these teams in a hat and kind of just pick one with the way these teams have had up and down seasons. You look at Utah State and Joe Lunardi's next 4 out. They're a team that they were one of the higher RPI teams for most of the season, and they hit a tough spot. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, you've got like Penn State, Texas Tech, College of Charleston. College of Charleston was ranked at one point in the season. You lose 1 or 2 games, and that can completely change. That's life in the lower majors there, the mid-majors, whatever you want to call them. Clemson, Michigan, Oklahoma State all trying to fight their way back in, and you've got Memphis, West Virginia, Nevada, and Auburn trying to hold on for dear life with those last 4 byes.
It's like Oklahoma State went from being probably around a 9 or 8 seed a couple weeks ago to now, after losing 5 in a row, they're now sitting right there, possibly not even going to make the tournament.
Yeah.
And that's just how quickly things change, especially if you're just not winning games.
Yeah, they did to themselves.
They quit. The shooting has just dried up.
Yeah, it's been everything. Their defense hasn't looked good the last couple of games. Something they've relied on throughout the season, and that's kind of taken a step back. And you've seen other teams hurt them. That's what they just haven't been able to score with the other teams, and keep up the pace there. And now you get one last regular season game down in Lubbock, and that's not going to be easy. Another team fighting and who's turned their season around. It might be a little too late for them to make it, but Texas Tech's playing like a March Madness team here the last few weeks, so that's not an easy game. And then you're looking at possibly a 7 or 8 seed in the Big 12 tournament. You could find yourself with an early exit there, and then your season's quickly over. So there's a lot riding on Saturday's game for OSU.
Yeah, it'll be an intriguing weekend to say the least. You look at the other 1 seeds here. Of course, Alabama, Houston, Purdue, Kansas. It is going to be a fun time as we make our way into March. And, of course, we'll talk about that more in the later episodes once we get to Conference Championship Week and March Madness.
There's a couple this week.
I'm not going to underestimate. We've got
got the Sun Belt.
Yeah, we've got the Sun Belt. We've got the OVC coming up. They're always the first to get done on this Saturday, so that's always a fun time to see who's going to win. Morehead State and Tennessee Tech trying to battle it out there. They're the favorites at least, but that means nothing at that Ford Center there in Evansville. So we'll have to see what happens there, but we've got a little bit of NFL news to get into before we make our way towards the NBA and the MLB. The Packers GM saying for the first time officially in 2021 and 2022, the position was we're not going to trade Aaron Rodgers, and now he's non-committal, saying, we'll just have to see what's going to happen there. So a bit of a change of tune there, and we'll see what happens with the Packers.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Aaron Rodgers starts the year next year with the Packers. I think it's kind of went downhill for them. I don't know. I mean, I think it's been the wide receiver issues, them not getting him the help that he deserves over there to keep that team afloat. And I think it's kind of backfiring on him now. And we'll see where he ends up. But, yeah, I'd be surprised if he's the quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's just for both sides in this situation, it'd be best if they go their separate ways, mainly just so Packers can get around to rebuilding the team, actually try to build the team back up. And also you can now work with Jordan Love, which I don't know how that ball's going to even turn out. But Rodgers can go to a team that all they need is just a quarterback, and they can get some picks out of it. That's just really best situation for that I think can go. Because if he comes back, I mean, Packers fans will be ecstatic that, hey, Aaron's back. But it just one of those, I don't know how you're just going to run into the same issues again that you ran last year unless things can just turn around for the team. So I don't really see how I just don't see Aaron coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see him either. I think this is the year he finally gets dealt somewhere. I mean, you saw what happened with the Packers last year, that whole learning curve trying to figure out, how the receivers are with Rodgers and all of that. I think just that start completely doomed them. Even when Green Bay tried to pick up the pace down the stretch, they weren't able to claw their way back, and it would not surprise me. I mean, I know it's been the meme for the past few weeks, but, I mean, we might be talking about future New York Jet Aaron Rodgers. You never know. But moving on to the Commanders news, speaking of other quarterbacks that'll be on the move, Carson Wentz officially released by the Commanders. I know, obviously, bit of a surprise to some, I'm sure. To some, they're not as surprised or not as shocked, I guess. But a bit of an interesting decision here. The Commanders already on their way to a new quarterback again. And, I mean, they already had to play quarterback shuffle this year, but they've officially made at least one of their decisions, that it will not be Carson Wentz, of course.
Yeah, I was shocked by this. I think he's the best quarterback on that roster. I think he gave them the best chance to win. I don't see Heineke being a franchise quarterback. I think Washington's desperate. I think they're trying to find the quarterback. I think they'll look for the draft there. I think that's why they make this move. They're ready to start fresh, find a guy in this upcoming draft, and get rid of that contract that Wentz was on. I think that's the biggest thing. I think if we would have saw Wentz with smaller money, I think we might be talking about this move not happening. I think it's where that contract is really the story behind this. And hey, if Wentz wants to be a starter on a lower team, I think he'll have an option, or I think he can take a backup role on a good team if he's willing to accept that.
The way his career is gone, it's going to be a team's going to have to be pretty desperate to get a quarterback if they want to start Wentz. I think obviously rookie class is going to be pretty good this year, and I think the teams that need to go grab a quarterback will go grab one of the ones in the draft. They might pick up Wentz as a backup option, or might have him as a temporary starter, and then eventually move him back to being a second string quarterback.
Yeah, to me, this is one of those, and I mean, the article itself mentions it as well, that, it gives the possibility of maybe Wentz goes to Carolina or somewhere like that, possibly. I don't know if that'd be a starting role or a backup role or whatever it'd be, but I would not be surprised at this point in his career and just how it has gone for Wentz that he turns into one of those solid backup guys that comes in and, maybe he has one of those, rides of his own where he comes in similar to what happened with Heineke this year.
Yeah, I would even give him two options. You made a ton of money, obviously, over the last couple of years. I mean, listen, in the end, it's not. I mean, it's not fake it. He's dealt with injury after injury, just the way it's gone. I mean, I wouldn't even put it past him. You know what? I've dealt with injuries. I got a ton of money. He's took a team 13-2 that season. Technically, I mean, I don't even play in the game, but he has a Super Bowl ring after having an MVP type season before the injury. I mean, why not just retire? I mean, you just started a family. You just had a kid. You got married a few years ago. Again, you got a ton of money. You got a championship, and if it is going to backup role, I mean, why don't you just? I mean, again, obviously it's not a deal. He's a younger type quarterback. He thought he'd be playing a lot longer, and his career would have went a different way. But in the end, it obviously didn't go the way he wanted it. He's battled injury after injury. Why don't you just? And he had that back concussion, so he had the head injury too. So I mean, I wouldn't think it'd be a bad idea to retire. Or to Connor's point about a team starring for a little bit. I mean, obviously not this year because of Trubisky's development, but a team like the Steelers last year. I mean, I'm not saying the Steelers, but like what they did in signing Mitch Trubisky and then drafting Kenny Pickett there. So to your point, Cade, maybe that's Carolina, but yeah, it's a similar situation that Steelers, where he starts the first couple games, maybe can prove himself again, and if it doesn't work out, you go to that rookie.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Andrew, I wouldn't be surprised if they do have a situation like that where Carson Wentz comes in, mentors a young quarterback or something like that, and when they think that guy is ready to pass Wentz on for the starting role, maybe that'll happen. But as we always say in the NFL, pretty much, you just got to wait and see.
Yeah. I did read Arizona wouldn't be a bad option because Kyler Murray keeps getting hurt. I think he might miss the start of the year, right?
There's a possibility there.
I forget what his injury was, but I think it. So yeah, he might miss the start of the year. So there's your chance for Wentz there. The only problem there is, say Wentz does look good again.
What do you do?
Yeah, you turn back to Murray.
Then obviously you run a 2-quarterback system. Have Wentz handed off to Murray, obviously.
Kyler had a torn ACL and meniscus.
So I'm pretty sure he's out the first 4 games.
He'll be out a while.
So you got to have you got to sign a solid backup, which I think Carson can at least temporarily take over that role for Colonels. Maybe win a couple of games if things can go right, as long as the team doesn't get injured early on. I think you can set it up to where you at least get a couple wins out of that, and then when Kyler comes back, the team can get stuff going. But we'll have to wait. Like you said, Cade, we'll have to wait and find out.
Yeah, and I do like Arizona. They got a lot of weapons to make his life a little easier. James Conner's a great running back. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is a fantastic wide receiver. They traded for, Robbie Anderson, I believe, midway through the year from Carolina. He's obviously a very good deep weapon there. So he has talent there. And then, obviously, Carson Wentz, his biggest weapon in Philly. Zach Ertz is over there now. So he can reunite with Ertz and have some familiarity with there and kind of have Ertz help him with the playbook and get adjusted to Arizona. So I think Arizona is a solid fit for him.
I think so, but like I said, we'll just have to wait and see if that happens. We think it's a good idea, but obviously we're not in that role. But speaking of the other final piece of NFL news, the Buccaneers are going to release Leonard Fournette. Essentially no bad blood here, nothing of that sort. It was just Fournette said he wanted to be with Brady. Brady's not there. He's retired for part 2 of retirement tour, so Fournette's gone. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of teams, unless he retires, obviously. I think there's going to be plenty of teams lining up to get him.
Be right there for might be a solid backup role, or he might get a good amount of might start for whoever. But Fournette, last year, I'm not sure, because of the way they kind of ran the offense, him and a lot of the running backs were not that effective at all, and it was just a lot of throwing, and Fournette's just kind of not where he would like to be in his career, but he'll still be, I think, depending on the system and who the coach is, I think that he'll be able to bring something to the team and also bring some, probably some experience and leadership. So it's not a bad, there's obviously no issues between both sides, and it frees up some cap for the Bucs to work with.
Well, I mean, the Bucs are still $55 million over the salary cap because of Brady's retirement there. He still has $35 million that's owed to him. So the Buccaneers are still in a bit of a situation there where they got to try to find something if they want to.
It's less people to give money too. So at least you're clearing out a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But, like at least some cap, even though it's not a whole lot. Obviously you still have a lot more to work. You have to deal with. So I'd probably see Buccaneers being pretty not so great this next season.
You never know. In that division, you never really know.
That's true.
Anything could happen in the NFC South. I mean, the Falcons waived Mariota today. I mean, anything can happen in the NFC South.
Yeah, I think there's supposed talks. Chiefs fans were like, "Hey, we should probably go after Mariota as a backup option for Mahomes." But I'm like,
you will bring Chad Henne back again just to accept it.
It's like I don't know if it's like I'm not sure if Mariota will want to accept a backup role. Then again, he's been relegated to that for the last couple seasons. Though obviously this past season he started, but then eventually got benched, and obviously showed up a lot of signs he did not enjoy getting benched for Ritter, but who knows how his situation will be.
And the second to final thing I should say to get to, the NBA standings. The NBA obviously already had their All-Star break. We've been through the trade deadline. We've been through all sorts of shenanigans over there, but looking at how each side stands right now in the Eastern Conference, the Bucks enjoying their 14-game win streak. They're just starting to not dominate people, but they're winning, and that's really all that matters in the NBA. If you get that W by your name at the end of the day. And Milwaukee with a 43-17 record. The Celtics right by them, though, with that 44-18 record. So those two battling it out for first. You go 4 games back, it's Philadelphia. Another few games back, Cleveland, New York, Brooklyn. Obviously, Brooklyn going to be in a bit of a different position, of course, with no Kyrie, no Kevin Durant, none of that going on, and Spencer Dinwiddie is now the leader of the Nets again. You stop me if you've heard that one before. Spencer Dinwiddie is one of the key contributors for the Brooklyn Nets. And then the Heat, Hawks, Raptors, and Wizards all currently in the play-in positions, with the Bulls just on the outside looking in. Going to be a bit harder to do, of course, with no Lonzo Ball the rest of the way. And then you look at the West. Denver on top by 5.5 games, a record of 43-19. Memphis, Sacramento, Phoenix, who keep in mind Kevin Durant has not even played for Phoenix yet, and they're not at their full potential. And then the Clippers, Mavericks, Golden State, Utah, Minnesota, New Orleans. But then the conundrum down here with the Blazers, Lakers, and Thunder all within a game. So you really have 13 teams fighting their way in the playoffs in the West.
If anything, it's one thing for the Thunder. It's like if the next, like say, 5 games went their way and teams started losing, they could literally jump a bunch of teams and get the 7th spot if things just go their way. But this is the closest I've seen the West. Well, as far as I've been paying attention, the West has been like really close from like 4 all the way down to where the Thunder are at. I've never seen it that close with that many teams. Then again, I've been paying more attention to the NBA this year, and I was going to bring up, obviously Giannis got hurt in the game against the Heat, and the team just absolutely dominated the Heat without Giannis. And usually you're thinking with Giannis, it would probably been even worse if he was playing.
No, I mean, the Bucks are well-rounded. They beat the Suns without Giannis over the weekend. Drew Holiday was in the All-Star game. He's a phenomenal player. Brook Lopez is one of the better centers in the East. Bucks are well-rounded. It doesn't surprise me that they're winning this many games.
I'm sorry to cut you off. It wasn't that many games. The fact that they dominated a solid team without much issues without Giannis.
Yeah, and again, it's just I'm saying it's credit.
I was just trying to clarify what I was meaning.
Yeah, I got you. I'm saying it's credit to how good that team is. Yeah. Well-rounded coach they are. They really don't have any flaws on that team. They have a ton of depth with Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, the team I think is really starting to catch fire. I think it's too late, and if we've been saying it for years now, but if they have a good offseason, it could be dangerous next year as the Knicks. I think they're really starting to put together a good team. I wouldn't be surprised for them to catch Cleveland. I think Cleveland's overplaying right now. I don't think they're that held, and that's the first series. I'd take the Knicks in that series. But I really like the direction New York's going there.
Well, I mean, I would think you would. You got Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. I mean, you got undefeated in the Josh Hart era for the New York Knicks, 6-game win streak. getting to celebrate Tatum's ejection last night, all of that fun stuff going on there. But like you said, Andrew, I mean, it's weird finally saying it, I guess, because we're so used to the Knicks being more of a punching bag for the league or a joke or something like that. But they're finally putting all the pieces together. They are, it's like you said, how many times have we said this? With 15 years in a row, it feels like now. If the Knicks can just make a move or two, they have that possibility. That door is starting to open up for them there in the East. And then looking in the West, I know you mentioned it, Connor, but 4-13. 4 games separate 4-13, and then Sacramento at third. Sacramento, just, if you've not been paying attention to the Kings, fantastic team to watch. And I mean, I'm not just talking about the meme with the beam that they have. They have a purple beam that shines at the top of their arena every time they win. Everyone loves it. But this is a Sacramento team that, if you've not been paying attention to them, Fox has been playing well, Sabonis has been playing well. This is a fun Sacramento team to watch.
It's like, and to think this last season they were so awful to watch, and now they're sitting right there third in the Western Conference. I definitely didn't see that big of a turnaround after one off season. Then again, I'm not saying it's happened before with other teams, but the fact that it happened to the Sacramento Kings is just astonishing.
Well, I mean, at least in my opinion, they finally got time to mesh together. It was one of those, they had a core that they liked, they had opportunities, and they had a lot of close games that didn't go their way. But now they're able to finally put it together, have that fresher start, and you're seeing what Sacramento can do.
No, exactly. I think this is a team they've been building for the last few years, rebuilding with Fox and everything, and they're one of the most fun teams to watch in the league. And I have a lot of guys on there that are very good players, and I think they're going to be up here for a while because they aren't a team that's going to go away. They got a lot of young guys. Again, it's a team that's been freshly built from the draft, similar to what the Sixers did. And I think I don't think they're good enough to overtake the Nuggets or something like that. But they're going to be up in the top for a while. And if another team, if they add one guy in the offseason, you could be looking at them at first in the West next year, and that would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be fun to see how this all plays out. Of course, we'll do updates every once in a while on how everything's going on. But I will say it's finally, for me, it's kind of fun to see Denver finally playing at their full potential with everyone pretty much healthy. Well, instead of it just being the Jokic show on his basically almost by himself, a lot of time you're seeing pretty much all their stars actually play. So it's pretty cool. Just one thing I know is I'm like, oh my gosh, Donovan Mitchell's not. Wrong guy. I'm thinking of. Is Jamal Murray? Yeah. Jamal Murray isn't hurt? Yeah. So Denver's finally got everything back to normal there, and you're seeing the Nuggets play to their full potential, like you said. But trying to see if there's any other teams that you've got the Suns who are getting ready to go into their final mode once Kevin Durant gets healthy. The Clippers able to get Westbrook from the buyout market. That'll be intriguing to see how he fits with them. And then the Lakers, LeBron just got injured, but Jared Vanderbilt, surprisingly big trade deadline acquisition. No one was talking about it, but he's played phenomenal so far. Anthony Davis getting back into shape and fully healthy again. So if the Lakers can just continue to battle through the injury storm, they have that opportunity. And then, of course, Damian Lillard dropping 71 the other night. Mm-hmm. Always a fantastic player. He can continue to rally Portland there. Yep. But it'll be fun to see how the rest of that plays out. So now that we've had some positive, fun discussion, we have now, of course, have to talk about the MLB spring training that I know is going to go the exact opposite way because obviously the Cactus and Grapefruit League don't really matter a whole lot. It doesn't matter who wins these. But what does matter is we've had some rule changes. Sadly. And yeah, I know both of you disagree about it. I know we've talked about it on this show before, but we've had some fun, if you enjoy ridiculous endings, or infuriating if you do not like the rules of games ending where you get called out on, not getting in the box quick enough or the pitch clock or something like that. But just what an interesting time we're going to have in the MLB here. Well, my whole thing with if we're just going to stick with obviously the pitch clock that obviously affects both the batter and the pitchers to get the game moving, which I'm not necessarily against it, but at a certain point during those games, you gotta know, like, okay, the pitch clock isn't really
necessary, you might as well, especially like for instance like this, because this would affect a playoff game like that comes down to the wire, and that's when you need like all the time in the world to finally like whether it be the batter or the pitcher to finally make a move. That's one where if I'm still in favor of keeping the clock, but then you have to get to a certain point where you have to eventually quit using that. But obviously these are spring training games. It shouldn't be as big of a deal, but the fact that it's already affected the outcome of games because a batter took too long, so they end up in a tie, or it brings in a run and it costs the game. That's just something that I feel like that just I don't know how to really truly feel about that. I mean, I already know I don't like it, but I don't know how to really express how I really feel about it, because this is like, because a lot of this will have, because obviously taking this into the regular season, this is going to severely affect game outcome of games if we continue the way we're using the clock.
Yeah, first, I think you can't just get rid of it mid-game. I think that would be a bad look. You're almost saying your own rule isn't good enough to be there late in games.
Or have a longer pitch clock.
So I think I don't think they could do basically a half game, to your point. I think you have to, if you're going to do it, you got to stick with it all game. And with that being said, I'm fully against it. There's not an argument I will believe that makes it that much better. Congratulations, you sped up the game maybe 20 minutes. I believe baseball isn't meant to be played with a clock.
No.
It's been one of to me at least, it's a fun aspect of it. There isn't you got to get a shot off in 24 seconds. Oh, you have to start a new play in the next 25 seconds, wherever the play clock is in football. To me, it's a sport that's lived, and I mean, goes back to who knows. I mean, 1800s.
It was like the late 1800s.
And so I don't like it. I get it. A lot of fans are going to be in favor because it does speed up the game. Well, that's the hope. We'll see if it actually does or not. I believe games the length of them are dictated based off of how many runs are scored.
Yeah.
If you're going to finish a game 2-1, obviously that game's going to take quicker than a game that finishes 10-9, and it's going to be the same exact thing. I watch every game, and
that's about obviously if you take into account for TV, that's about 2.5 hour, like less than 2.5 hours. If it's like a really low scoring game, then it's obviously a game with a bunch of runs. That game goes over 3. It can go over 3 hours, but it's like that's one thing I like about baseball is that you don't know. Like when you're going into a game, you don't know if you're going to get a bunch of runs scored, which will extend the game for quite a bit, or you get not much of anything and the game goes by just like that. Because I was at Angels and Seattle game last year when I was down in Los Angeles, and that game went by pretty quick, at least to me, and that was without all this other stuff. It was just like, that obviously wasn't as high scoring of a game, and then obviously there was game went Kansas City. Game went a little long because they scored quite a few runs, but otherwise it's not much of a difference to me, since I think for me and you, really because we love baseball, so it's like the amount of length isn't really that big of an issue to us, but to other people, the casual fan probably want it just a little bit shorter, but there's just not a good way to. I just don't know. It's either you either have, for me, I think best situation is either have a longer pitch time count timer, so at least you're hoping that it's enough time for both the pitcher and the batter to run with, or you get rid of the clock entirely. That's probably the best way to work that, and I don't know what the proper time would be on the clock. 30 seconds?
It'll be interesting. Mike and Perkins chiming in saying networks want a 3-hour game, no more than that, and I do agree with that. I think the networks have a specific time slot they're going to want to go with. I think one of the examples was the World Series that we had. I can't remember if it was this year or last year, but we had a game that ended, I think, 6-3 or something like that, and ended up starting at 7 Central Time and ended at 11:20 or something like that.
That was might have been last year.
Which I think, and it's one of those that, personally, I'm used to long sporting events, so it doesn't bother me, but I saw so many people saying, it is 12:20 on the East Coast. What are y'all doing? This should have been over 2 hours ago.
I think that's their problem, not
See,
ours.
I disagree with that take a little bit, though, about the networks. And I'll get into that in a second. But I also think if you want to avoid the 12 midnight games, you have to start the games earlier.
Yeah.
Like you're starting World Series games at 8:15, 8:30 on the East Coast. Those games are still going to run into 11:15 to midnight. Again, it's good to me. It's going to depend on how many runs are in that game. I mean, you look at it. Again, spring training, I don't really know how to really judge the length of the game. But I'm watching the Phillies spring training game today. The final score was 7-2. The game took basically 3 hours. It was like 2 hours and 58 minutes. So, like, to me, that didn't really change much in terms of the length of the game. And to the network point, I don't think they're that worried about it fully because a lot of them, until the playoffs, you're not really showing much. You look at I'll take the Phillies, for example. They're NBC Sports Philly. After the Phillies games, they're going to show the Phillies post-game show. After the post-game show, I mean, it's already hitting 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. They run into, like, some Eagles show. Like, you're just going to, like, a lot of these teams are being shown on their own broadcast now. You're just running into other shows. Like, I know, I mean, every team has their post-game shows now.
Yeah.
So then you run into that, and then you kind of run into repetitive. Like, it's not like you're on, it's not like the NFL where you got Fox, you got a new show being released after the 4 o'clock games or something like that. So I think that's where baseball differs a little bit in terms of relying on the network fully. Because even the World Series, when you get to the World Series, it's not like you're releasing a new show at 11:30 after the World Series. I don't think they already know not to put that stuff on. So I don't know how much the networks are really relying on it to be strictly 3-hour games. And
I think
honestly,
I think that's what the aim is, just to have that basically be the end mark. But obviously, then you're running games that just take a lot longer. But
exactly,
but then again,
you're still gonna have those games that take long. It's not like, oh well, they had a 20-second shot or 20-second pitch clock now, so every game will be under 3 hours. You're still gonna get plenty of games over 3 hours.
I agree. I think
Another issue I think is baseball never starts on time.
it never does.
I mean, you look at regular season, you look at World Series, you got that first scheduled pitch, let's just say 7:05. Half the time you're not throwing the first pitch till 7:10 because you got 3 commercials before, just from the last time they leave pregame to the time they announce the lineups and then start. What they should do is, I get it, everyone needs to warm up, pitcher needs to warm up and stuff. Have that start at, say, 7. Like the pitcher's going up to warm up at 7:05. Have him start his warm ups at 7. That way you're throwing the first, and there you go. That saves 5-10 minutes just off the top of the game. So I think baseball is very bad at the commercial issues, starting on time, and I think and you'll see it this year again because they don't change the rules. The replay continues to be a problem, and that is extending the game tremendously. And that is something that's not going to change. Is you turn into these 5-minute reviews, and even though they have a clock for 2.5-minute reviews, they somehow still go longer. And then even after that, it takes a little bit to throw that pitch. So there's a lot of other areas I think you can clean up the game rather than the pitch clock.
Well, especially on instant replay, you get some of those where they do need the extra time, which is why obviously it's supposed to be a 2.5, but it's like we all know it's never going to be 2.5 unless it's like an obvious reverse of the call.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's like one of those. Yeah, they do take quite a bit.
And that's where I'm in favor of a clock, and I think every sport should have one. Is okay, we're gonna do 3 minutes. If we can't come up with a call in 3 minutes, you automatically stick with what's on the field because you know what? Every sport always says you need conclusive evidence to overturn the call. If you can't come up with a call in 3 minutes, I don't think the evidence is conclusive. I mean, how many more angles do you need? I forget which basketball game I was watching the other day, and it might have been the Sixers, and the review literally took 5 minutes. I'm like, and then they kept the same call. So, like, eventually they come out with, we didn't have enough evidence, we're going to stay with the call. But
if you couldn't find conclusive evidence within, like, 2.5, maybe 3 minutes, you got to just go with the thing on the field. That's something I agree with.
Well, my favorite was
the game up.
One of my favorites was one of the football games this year I saw where they're like, well, they're going through 41 different camera angles. It was just like, and half of them are going to be blurrier from the other side of the field. So, like, what are we doing here?
Why aren't they looking at the ones that have a much better angle from the get-go. That's just all you're doing is saying, well, they have all these angles, but they can't, and all like 2/3 of them you can't see anything.
Yeah.
So it's like you might as well just only go with the 1/3 that actually gets a better view.
Yeah, but bringing it back to baseball, I think that the pitch clock here is it going to take time to get used to? Obviously,
Yeah, they're gonna get used to it.
obviously, but I think once they get to it, you will see a difference. You will see games. I mean, we're already seeing it here in spring training, where the average spring training game last year took about 3 hours. The average game this year takes about 240 to 235, which, to your point, understand, that's 20 to 25 minutes. That doesn't feel like a big deal. But to some people, that I've at least seen online, to them that's tremendous. That's okay. That gives me 20 other minutes to do something else, or maybe you can watch 2 games in one day or something like that. So it's interesting to see the different perspectives, especially as the season rolls along here. Also, Colorado Rockies are 3-0. Just enjoy that. That might be the last time they're at the top of a leaderboard for the rest of this year.
Kansas City, it sounds like another spring training where they're playing really well in spring training, but don't give me that false hope, and they give you false hope. So, yeah, I'm hoping Kansas City will at least be competitive. Obviously, the Central really not very competitive in terms of, all the teams are not that great, besides maybe, 2. Everyone else is, you have 2, and then everyone else is really bad. So I'm hoping Kansas City can at least try to compete for at least in the wild card through the remaining of the year, but who knows with that.
Yeah.
But I'll probably say Philly's obviously spring training for them. I'm expecting Philly to, again, compete.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
it depends on how their pitching staff goes, though.
Well, the pitching's going to be great. It's all going to come down to the NL East is going to be brutal. They're going to be one of the best divisions in baseball, so you're going to have arguably you could throw the Phillies, Mets, and Braves into a hat and pick which one you want to win the division, and then whichever one you want to be a wild card too. And I think that's where you might get one of those 3 teams that miss the playoffs because of how good that division will be.
I haven't seen, but what have Mets have done since they lost their best pitcher? What have they done to replace them?
They got arguably a better pitcher in Justin Verlander. So
I didn't see that news, so I was curious who
they didn't waste that. I think it was 2 days later. They didn't waste any time. They lost DeGrom. They said, all right, let's go throw DeGrom's money at Verlander.
It works.
No, absolutely. And then they pretty good offensively too. So it's gonna be a battle between the Mets, Phillies, and Braves. I fully expect 2 of them to get into the playoffs, maybe 3. But with the other 2 making, you might keep one out. And I don't know. I like the NL better than the AL this year.
I think talent-wise it's better.
Yeah, Dodgers, Padres are going to be a force to be reckoned with on that side. Cardinals will be pretty good again. Obviously, they have the reigning MVP guy coming in, and arguably MVP 2 coming in as well. So, no, the NL is going to be a mess because I think you're going to leave some teams out of the playoffs this year. Or, no, I say it like you're choosing to leave them out.
How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you leave these teams?
How dare you?
You're going to get some teams that don't make it just because of how good everybody else is. I mean, I get they were down a little bit last year, but let's not forget the Giants won the NL West 2 years ago. They still got a lot of those guys back this year. They signed some guys this offseason. I don't think they're better than the Dodgers or Padres, but I think they're good enough to be a playoff team. I think they'd go out there and maybe win a division like the AL Central. But with that being said, I mean, I think the AL West is going to be one division to remember this year too.
It will be a fun season, to say the least. But that'll wrap it up for our show tonight, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, like I said earlier, feel free to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment down below if you agree, disagree, neutral, whatever your opinion is. We want to hear from you. But he's Andrew Santangelo, the other one's Connor Gray, and I'm Cade Kennedy. And folks, have a great evening, everybody.